Well, the Obama campaign punishing a Florida TV station, Channel 9 in Orlando, for asking Joe Biden some pretty tough, direct, and blunt questions about the Obama campaign's proposals. They've canceled all future interviews with WFTV for questions like this one, where anchor Barbara West asked the vice presidential candidate to comment on his own quote.
You recently said, mark my words, it'll not be 6 months before the world tests Barack Obama. But what worries many people is your caveat, asking them to stand with him because it's not going to be apparent initially that he's right. Are you forewarning Americans that nothing will be done and that America's days as the world's leading power are over?
No, I'm not at all. I don't know who's writing your question. The fact of the matter is that everyone has acknowledged, from Colin Powell on, that the next president of the United States is going to be tested, whether it's John McCain or it's Barack Obama.
So can we expect the Obama campaign's policy, apparently, of punishing unsupportive media to continue if they win the White House? Seton Motley, Director of Communication at the Media Research Center. Seton, you know, is it fair and right for the Obama campaign to say, hey, we don't like those questions, we're not going to put anybody out for you anymore on this television station?
Well, I can understand that they're not used to tough questions because they certainly haven't gotten a heck of a whole lot of them. But their history of responding to the few outlets that give them tough questions is not very positive going forward in a potential Obama administration. You had Stanley Kurtz for the National Review and David Freddoso, who's written a book, The Case Against Barack Obama, go on a radio show, and Obama put out a nationwide email flooding the station with calls telling them not to allow them on the air. You had the American Issues Project in Houston run an ad about Obama's connection to Bill Ayers, and they wrote a letter to the Justice Department asking that the American Issues Project and their contributors be investigated. So it makes you worry going forward if they're writing letters to ask the Justice Administration now, what will an Obama administration do when they're in control of the Justice Department with people who ask questions they don't like? Look,
Barbara West is a veteran at that station. She was Peter Jennings' principal assistant. She worked with Peter Jennings, so she's no slouch. I mean, is the Obama campaign, you think they have a point if they get tough questions, or do you think that they've gone over the line?
Oh, I think the Obama campaign is way overreacted to this. I mean, look, they're accusing Barbara West. By the way, if she worked for Peter Jennings, no conservative he. So it's not like she's coming at this from a National Review perspective, if that's the case. But going beyond that, the Obama campaign has no standing on this reaction. She asked some simple questions that are very legitimate, that are right out of quoting what Joe Biden said back to him and saying, how do you explain this? And he goes out of his way to lie about it and say, well, I'm saying either candidate will be tested. No, he didn't. In the interview, he specifically said Obama would be tested. So their reaction is, we don't like tough questions. We're going to call the person a liar. We're going to dismiss them, and we're going to excommunicate them from future interviews.
You know, this really shows up the mainstream media, especially some of the Washington press corps, who try to, I think, in many cases, lob their softballs. But, I mean, what's more threatening, I think, to our democracy is trying to muzzle the press, trying to ignore legitimate questions. We've seen it in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. He shut down television stations there. They're now, the Democrats are talking about getting rid of the fairness doctrine to potentially silence the conservative radio hosts like Rush and Sean and others. Are we going down the line, if there's an Obama White House, of a battle, the deepest level of the Obama campaign, an Obama administration versus a media that asks real questions?
You're exactly right on the fairness doctrine. That is the one news outlet that exists that is not dominated by liberals. You got the televisions, you got the newspapers, you got the news magazines, all dominated by liberals. Conservative talk radio has dominated. Liberal talk radio has failed every time it's tried. So if you can't beat them, censor them. And that's why they're talking about bringing back the fairness doctrine. That's why they're reacting to any negative questions in the traditional media, like they're doing with this woman in Barbara West in Orlando. Is she going to get the Joe the Plumber treatment and dig into her tax history and her personal history? We know more about Joe the Plumber than we know about Barack Obama. Is Barbara West going to be next?
Well, Seton Motley, we thank you for joining us. We'll have to see how this starts to play out through the campaign and perhaps thereafter. Jamie?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Joining us now is Seton Motley. He's Director of Communications at the Media Research Center. Seton, good to see you again.
It's been ages. Yeah.
You were on. We were together just a few hours ago here on the Fox News channel, and really since then this story has exploded. You got on both sides. Some people are saying those were direct, specific, tough questions that have not really been asked of the Obama-Biden ticket. Others, especially in the blogs, a lot of those net nuts, you know, saying this is ridiculous. These questions are just insane, and Joe Biden was right. Do you think it was fair?
Absolutely, it was fair. It's about time somebody asked this. Part of the reaction, part of the blowback on this is, I think a lot of the media is embarrassed that a local reporter, and this is nothing to insult her in any way, but that a local reporter showed all the bigwigs, all the media elite up by asking the pertinent questions, questions that matter to Joe Biden. How is it out of line to quote Joe Biden and say, did you really mean what you said here? How is this going to play out in an Obama administration? I don't know how that's out of line. I don't know why the net roots are the net roots, and they're nuts anyway. But God knows they were providing fodder left and right for the media. They took all their questions unfettered when Sarah Palin came on the scene. We were hearing about her daughter wasn't pregnant, you know, her son wasn't really her son, it was her daughter's son, and that was all coming from the net roots, and those were totally out of line. Look, so to ask a specific policy question to the man who uttered the statement is not, by any stretch of the imagination, out of line.
Well, Barbara Rest was the questioner, the interviewer. She's a 16-year veteran of the station. She was Peter Jennings of ABC, assistant in London years ago, covered international stories with Peter Jennings. She was a professor in Vermont. But look, she talked about Karl Marx. I mean, what does Karl Marx literally have to do in terms of a news question to Joe Biden?
Well, because the question to Joe Biden was actually about something Barack Obama said. This is the famous Joe the Plumber exchange, where he said, I'm for spreading the wealth around. Well, spreading the wealth around is another way of saying redistribution of the wealth, which is Karl Marx's expression, from each according to his means, to each according to his needs. All Barack Obama did was update the language. The sentiment is exactly the same as Karl Marx's. So finally, someone in the media asked this very legitimate question, and of course it's deemed out of bounds by the left and a lot of the media.
Now, the reaction from the Biden campaign, the Obama campaign, they're not dealing with that station. What does this mean if they get into the White House? I mean, we've seen this before. John McCain's campaign kicked off a New York Times reporter from the bus a while back. They canceled an interview at another cable network. They weren't happy with something. I mean, they do, oftentimes, politicians don't deal with reporters they don't like.
Well, they know that access is the key to a media outlet being effective as a media outlet. And if they're not going to deal with somebody, that's their way of threatening their very existence as a news outlet. So they shut them off. Do you remember during the Democratic convention when that ABC producer was shoved into the street and then arrested because he was reporting on some Democratic bigwigs meeting in a hotel? As we discussed earlier, the American Issues Project ran an ad connecting Obama to Bill Ayers, and they wrote a letter to the Justice Department saying, let's investigate not only the American Issues Project, but the donors to the 527. So, these guys do not like opposition. They do not like tough questions. They shut down media outlets. They involve the Justice Department. My point is, if they ask the Justice Department to do it now, what's it going to be like in a potential Obama administration when they don't have to ask? They just tell the Justice Department to investigate these people for something as simple as daring to question the Obama campaign.
Very chilling point, potentially. And I would urge anybody on any side to see this interview. Just go on YouTube if you don't live in Orlando and watch it. Barbara West is the veteran reporter who conducted that interview with Senator Biden. Seton Motley, thanks very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, sir.